Okay, guys. So the topic of today's lecture is going to talking about the vision document and establishing the project scope. If time permits, we're going to begin another chapter. Perhaps today it's a review of the requirements engineering process. All right, and this would be the end of what I call the dry material of the course, the boring material of the course. Okay, so you did a very good job hanging in with me for the first couple of lectures, and now this lecture, maybe even half of the next lecture. But then right after that, this is where we get to the modeling parts. These are very, very skillful and artful techniques, not one of these things that you just read the slides and you get it. All right, the slides doesn't actually say that much. Is what you do by hand is where you get to actually learn. So I mean, I hope that you don't just attend those lectures and then comes the modeling lecture, which is a big part of this course, and then the attendance starts to go off, right? So I want you to be there. I know you can actually attend, see the live lectures on YouTube, but nonetheless, I'd rather that you would actually be in the class or watching at home, where you can think analytically and think critically about what we're doing when we're actually doing those exercises. The struggle is part of the learning. Okay, so and just like in programming, right? Getting those syntax errors, getting those null pointer exceptions, getting those you call the static variable from a non-static context. Those very frustrating. The struggle is part of the learning, right? So imagine you just went to the programming lectures but never actually attempted to write any code, right? You're not going to be learning that much. All right, so anyway, the topic of today's lecture, we're going to talk about the vision document. All right, and then what can we do to set and maybe even reduce the project scope. Okay, so the vision document, if you remember the pyramid for requirements, we have the pyramid with the three layers. The top layer is the needs. This is where we're talking about mostly the problem domain, and then the second two layers talk about features. Then the bottom one talks about software specification. The bottom one, we're going to be sitting in there for quite a bit of time in this course. So the needs, tends to be happening at the very obviously very beginning. This is where the customer is telling us what is it they're suffering with. There is no injection of any ideas at this point, but just telling you, I'm suffering from this, we're suffering from that. My customers are suffering from this and so on. My operations are slow, they're redundant, the bureaucracy is too heavy. We're pretty sure we can use software to help us, right? And this is where the whole digital transformation comes into play too. That's, you keep hearing this buzzword nowadays. But the vision document, it encompasses the first two levels, where it talks about the needs and then maybe some features to provide a realization, to provide a solution for those needs. Okay, and again, we got to be careful that in all of this pyramid, we are actually still writing what is it that we want the system to do rather than how it does it. Okay, it's a very confusing concept, but we'll get there. We'll get there at some point. All right. The first two layers, right, is also what we are going to be discussing a little bit later on in the course. The term goals, okay, or goal-oriented modeling. It starts to talk about the first two layers as well, where in the goals, you're actually writing down, modeling the need, and you're modeling the feature. Right? But then we realize that some of these needs, they interact with each other. Sometimes they support each other, sometimes they're conflicting with each other, right? And how these needs are broken down into features and tasks and so on. So this is where goal-oriented modeling comes in. That's maybe around week 8 or 9 of the course. All right. So this is the scope of the vision document, which we're going to be talking mainly about the needs and some of the features as well. Okay, so the vision document captures the needs of the user, the features of the system, and other common requirements for the project. And as such, it's called the vision document. It extends over the top two layers of the pyramid, thereby defining a very high level abstraction of the problem, right? Not so much of the solution, but rather the problem. And the solution part comes in the features layer, okay? All right, so the importance of the vision document, okay? Remember, everything starts with a vision, okay? Just like, in the government here, we have a vision, okay, Vision 2030. It starts with a vision, right? And then in the vision, maybe we'll have big strategies. Even the strategies themselves are not concrete, okay? Like we want to be, like say, the top in education. We want to be the top in offering e-government services. We want to be the, we want to step away, for example, from dependency on oil, okay? But still, even at that level, the features level or the strategies level, you can equate that to the features level. We're still not actually offering specific solutions. So when we get to the specifications, this is where we start to actually offer specific solutions. Like, for example, building a major plant that produces solar panels and things like that, and so on, right? But it's a basis for discussion and agreement among the stakeholders, okay? So think of it, if you go back this way, right? Think of the top of the pyramid like it's an eye. There's an eye at the very, very tip of the pyramid. And just let me show this to the guys at home. No, not a pen. Okay, so imagine you have an eye over here, and this is going to be your vision, okay? All right, so you're looking down. Now, what we want to do is we want to set that vision, right? We don't want somebody to have their vision set down in a particular direction, and the people who are going to actually be doing the work, they have a misunderstanding of what the vision is, and they're looking at a completely different direction, okay? So first of all, we got to agree about what is it that we have as our vision for the software that we're going to be creating. All right. It's going to capture the essence of the product from all significant perspectives in a short, abstract, and readable and manageable form. The product of the vision document process obviously is the vision document, and it's not a really big document, okay? It's just a few pages long. We're going to look at the template in just a moment. Now, the template that I'm going to show you is just one of many templates that exist, okay? You can find them online. You can find them, they might be a little bit different. Obviously, I'm not going to be asking you to memorize a template, okay? Because I'm not the devil, all right? And because it's there, you can always look it up anytime you want to. So, but I'm just going to go through the main sections, okay? So first, you can see there's an introduction to what this product is about. Maybe talks a little bit about why is it that we need it, and so on. Next up, we have a section about user description. So we're actually envisioning in our mind who is it that we're serving and who is it that's going to be using that software. Okay, and that's actually part of establishing those two lines, those vision. Okay, that triangle that we're looking at, so that we are agreeing upon this. Now we're going to talk about the product itself. It's called product overview. All right. The product perspective, the capabilities, some of the capabilities, the benefits, some assumption dependencies, costs, and pricing. All right. And then next up, we move on to some features and feature attributes. Okay, not all of them. All right. So number 4 and number 5 talks about features. So that we're moving into the second layer of that pyramid. And actually, at the very, very bottom, there is something called an exemplary use case. Use cases is a big part of this course, but actually use cases is on the third layer. But we're actually saying exemplary, like one example of one concrete situation, of us using that system, okay, through one of the features, through then realizing one of the needs that we have, okay? We look at other products and other product specifications. For example, if there's any standards we want to adhere to, any licensing, performance requirements, and so on, system requirements. And again, this is not the heavy hitting requirements engineering documentation we're talking about. So in a requirements engineering process, the full blown one, all right, where we produce something called an SRS, a software requirement specification. Okay, that's a very, very big document. Okay, no less than 80 pages, even for a toy project. Okay, but this is not it. This is just a vision document. All right. And you'll see that towards the end, one of the, yes,
Can I turn off the light?
sure. You mind turning off the light? Just anyone. Yeah. All right. Can you see me at least? Huh? Okay. All right. When it comes to the documentation section, you're talking about, now you can see, for example, it says user manual online help. We're not actually putting the user manual here. We're just saying, what is it that we expect? We're actually expecting a user manual to be produced. We're expecting online help to be there and so on, right? So it's kind of like what you would discuss at a dinner with a customer, all right? It could be also a basis for what we call the feasibility study. Okay, we're gonna look at that in the next chapter. Okay, yes.
Who is this for?
Who's the
The
what?
document.
The scope.
No, yeah, the document.
Okay, what's the question? Who's the what?
Who is it for?
Who's it for? Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not for anyone per se, but we're building it together. So you're the customer, I'm the requirement. We're building it together. Okay, and it's kind of like a way of, instead of just you and I talking verbally of what we're seeing this project is going, we're setting it on paper, okay? And it's actually gonna be used, okay, you can see a little part here about, say, cost and pricing is gonna be used for something called a feasibility study as well. And then it goes to executive management. At this point, we haven't like really began the project in itself, because at this stage, we might decide to pull the plug on it. Okay, we might decide, this is not the vision that we have for the project, or maybe there's a similar project that already exists, similar software that we can just buy and maybe accommodate a little bit. Okay, or maybe it's just going to cost us too much, or maybe right now is not just the time for it. Okay, so you'll see that the vision document tends to actually begin before the actual project begins, and you don't want to spend that much time or effort on it, because you're actually using it as a basis of, other than agreement, but as a basis of deciding whether you're going to go ahead with that project or not. All right. Now, if you spend 8 months doing it and realize you don't want to do that project, so good news, bad news. Good news is we didn't actually spend our time doing a project that we don't want. But bad news is we already spent 8 months of work coming to this realization. All right. So it's got to be quick and dirty. And maybe no more than 2 weeks before this vision document is established. All right. Now, if for some reason that project had the go ahead light from the beginning, okay, like it's really obvious that we need that software and so on, again, we can still create that vision document, sitting down with the customer to say, all right, this is where we expect the project to go. And again, from a very high level. Okay, so think of it, say, at the upper levels of the government or upper levels of executive management. They're not going to be talking about a specific feature that exists on a website, but rather that what is it that they have a vision for their website to do, okay, or their mobile application to do, and so on. All right. This discussion has happened in all the projects that you can possibly expect. Okay, Uber, Noon, Amazon, any of these projects, they had that vision. Okay, Steve Jobs began the whole iPhone revolution with a vision. Okay, it all starts with a vision, right? And in the vision, he agreed on certain things in his mind. Maybe, I don't know if he discussed it with others, but in his mind, he agreed on certain things, right? And when those got implemented at some point, then the product became a big success that it was at the end. All right. And then maybe at the very bottom, you'll have a glossary with some terms in case we're using some jargon from the domain that needs to be understood by both sides. Right, then the glossary is there. Okay, so that in short would be the vision document. Right, but as we're writing the vision document, we're actually also establishing the scope of the work that we're going to be doing. All right, the scope is basically what is it that the software that we're going to be developing is going to be doing. Is going to be doing, and obviously it depends on 3 factors. coming together. First of all, how much functionality you're asking for, what are the resources that are available. Another flavor of resources is the time, which is also, you can think of it another type of resource. Okay, together you factor in all of these into the equation. It should let you know how much work or what is it that we expect that software to do. Okay, if we have infinite resources and infinite time, then that scope could be infinite as well. All right, we can get the software to do this more and this feature and that feature, and we're never going to stop. Okay, but we're in a business and we gotta come to a point where we say, based on the resources that I have, based on the time that I need, that I have, then this is the time I need to, this is how much functionality I'm going to put in. Okay, sometimes time is even more important than the functionality that I'm going to put in, or even making sure that the software is bug free. Okay, which is a concept that never actually does happen. Okay, for example, especially in the world of software, the concept of first to market is extremely crucial. Okay, so you see something like YouTube. Okay, they were the first to come up with the idea of video streaming and so on, the way back in the years. All right, the biggest and the heaviest hitters, Google, at some point, I don't know if you know this, had something called Google Videos. Okay, and Google, with all its might, it was still a big mammoth at that point, but still they couldn't compete with YouTube, right? And if you can't beat them, buy them, right? Exactly, right? Same thing, Facebook, WhatsApp, all right? Facebook actually has something going on with Messenger, right? Where you can message people and so on, but they couldn't, right? WhatsApp was the first to market. Hundreds of other applications came up with the idea of what WhatsApp is actually doing. It's actually a very, very simple idea, but they were just the first to do it. So everybody just kept talking about, okay, I'll just go ahead and, you know, find you on WhatsApp. I'm going to send you a message and what we're going to do this. And just WhatsApp became the synonymous word of, I'm going to send you a message for free, right? Another example, eBay. Heard of eBay?
Yeah.
Okay, so eBay came in. One of the competitors that wanted to beat it was Microsoft. Microsoft, big project, right? Big company. I mean, couldn't do it. So if you can't beat them, buy them. Okay, and that's another reason. Okay, Facebook then end up buying WhatsApp as well. All right, and all of those products had the advantage of being the first to market. People find something, they hear about it for the first time, they get used to it, and it's very rare that you'll find somebody else coming in later and having the bigger share of the market. Okay, one of the rare examples, actually, the search engine market, because Yahoo, when internet first started, Yahoo was actually the biggest thing, and Google then came over, and that's like one of the rare situations that this can actually happen. So if you know, and you got spies and other companies are telling you that this company is going to, you know, they roll out a product in November that does something that you want to be doing as well, you might want to roll out yours in September, even if it wasn't the finished product, just to beat them. Okay, just so people will be talking about your product before the next one, and when the next one comes out, it's like, oh yeah, just like the first one. All right. The project scope derives from the following elements. Obviously, the resources, like I said. Now, resources come in many different flavors. It's not just money. Okay, obviously, that's the one thing that comes to mind. Money, and the second one is time. All right. Some say time is a soft boundary because, you know, you can just use up more time in case there's nothing, you know, but that money is more of a harder boundary, but I can argue with that because, you know, you can still add more money to a product at the end of the day. But resources come into, you know, what are the human resource that you have? That actually plays a big part of your capabilities. Okay, it's not just how many people you have. It's not labor work, but actually, what are the skills that they have? What expertise do they actually have? Okay, so you might look at a project, it's doable, but it could have been doable with a different team, not my team. Okay, and because of my team, we might want to change the scope a little bit. Okay, another resource could be office space, licenses. All right, even experience of previous similar project. That in itself, the experience is a resource. Okay, and when you take project management, you'll realize that sometimes when you're actually making a case for a project in your company, some of the things that you can put down to say this would be a good project for the company to take is that the learning effect that it would have on the employees after the project itself is done, it will be beneficial in future projects. So you're telling them sort of like, don't just focus on the benefit you're going to get out of the software that's going to be created from this project, but rather this is going to be beneficial for the entire corporation in general. All right. If the effort required to implement the system is equal to the resources available during the scheduled time, great. Okay. But what if it's not? Okay. And usually it is not. Okay. When we're having that dinner, and you know, we start to get excited about the things that our project is going to do, our software is going to do, we tend to go overboard. Customers tend to go overboard. Okay. It's just a wish list. All right. There's nothing preventing the customer from dreaming. All right. And even us, we can get carried away with them as well, saying, yes, we can get the project to do this, we can get the project to do that. But then we sit down and face reality and say, okay, how much money we have? We only have 100,000 reals. Okay. So we're going to have to cross a whole bunch of things out of it. Could be, for example, another resource that we have is the time. We only have 6 months to do it. So again, we look at the list and we say, we gotta take some things off that list. But how do we do that? Okay. So what happens if the scope actually requires twice the amount of resources that I actually have? Okay. Best case scenario, I'm going to develop 50% of the things that I actually need. That I actually decided that I want to be building. Okay. So for my for my big list, I just did 50% of it. That's actually best case scenario. Normally it's not even that, because a lot of the things that I do in my development, okay, it's not just you spend 1 week building this feature, that 1 week building that feature, and so on, and just go week by week. Sometimes you gotta create and you gotta invest time in creating an architecture, some subcomponents or subsystem that is beneficial to the entire system, so that this next feature plugs into here, plus next feature plugs into there, and so on and so forth. Okay, I mean, think about it in this way. Okay, a car has a body. Okay, has a chassis. Okay, the chassis is the internal frame of the car from inside. Okay, you can put in a lot of bells and whistles on the car, but you gotta have that chassis itself. Now, the chassis itself is not actually a feature. It's an architecture for the car, but it still requires me to put in some time and effort and money. All right. So it's not like there's a linear relationship between the features that you're actually implementing and the money that you're spending or the resources that you're spending. Okay. So by the time, so let's just say you had 10 features in that car, but by the time you've actually built the chassis, you built the framework for the car, you only had time to develop one feature. Okay. So you end up with a car that has one feature, right? It's one feature is not 50% of the 10 that we had earlier on. All right. We already finished that part. Okay. In some situations, like I said, you might actually realize that by the time you've finished all your money and time, all you built is a chassis. Okay. In other words, you build an architecture, but it has no features. So you spend all this time, you spend all your money, and you got nothing. That's rather worst case scenario as well. Okay. So best case scenario, you get 50%. Worst case scenario, you get nothing. All right. So with this, quality gets affected as well. Right? What if I start rushing things? Right? Then the software that I'm creating obviously going to be littered with bugs. Every software in the world is littered with bugs, by the way. But if you manage your project better, you end up with a situation where you have lesser and lesser and lesser issues with your software. I think I've talked to you about my capstone project and the situation that I had with it. So again, if you rush things at the end, one of the biggest mistakes that we do is that we start to hire people. Now, in practice and even research, it has shown that adding people towards the end of the project is actually detrimental to the project, because what it does is it actually slows things down even further. Okay. Now, the complicated thing about software engineering is that it's a virtual world. Okay. So in order to understand what is going on in that software that is being created, right, you have to dive into somebody's mind, okay, who's already working 24 hours a day, okay? And to dive into that person's mind, all you got to do is you keep asking, and you keep asking, you're delaying that other person, all right? You're disturbing the other person, okay? So it's actually been shown that if you just add people towards the end, all you're doing is just you're slowing the project even more and more and more, okay? It's not like, say, civil engineering, where you can see visually the actual solution and you can see how far we've reached, all right? Because it's something you can see and you can touch, all right? And you say, okay, I'm gonna pick up next day from here and I'm gonna keep on working, okay? That doesn't exist in software engineering, all right? Testing is reduced quite often to a minimum. You will be experiencing this yourselves 2 years from now when you hit your capstone, right? Because you're gonna be working until the very last day. And one of the reasons why you're working, if you're behind schedule, you're just scrambling to finish the functions of your product. If you're ahead of schedule, you're actually quite excited to add more features, right? So it tends to be that testing is kind of like the more boring part of software engineering. So testing gets to be at a minimum, but you'll experience this. Chances are you're going to be in the first group of we're behind schedule. We thought we are going to be doing a lot more than we expected, right? And this is very normal, all right? Documentation is eliminated altogether because we don't really have that much time. Again, that's because we've set the scope to be too big at the very beginning. Now, in other words, what I'm trying to say is we never actually gave ourselves a chance when the project was too big to begin with, when the scope was too big to begin with. Okay? Had we had a reasonable scope, then we could have had a proper software engineering process. Do you know, in research, they actually say that a proper software engineering process should have 50% of the project's budget dedicated to testing. Okay, we spend less than 5%, but properly it should have been more than or roughly 50%. Documentation, again, it tends to be one of the not so exciting aspects of software development. You know, when you signed up for this degree, one of the last things you were thinking of or envisioning yourself doing is sitting down and writing documentation. It is nonetheless a very crucial, and I'm agreeing with you, it is boring, but it is nonetheless a very crucial aspect of software development. So I'm going to tell you a little story about this. So, you know, at one point I'm a student like you, right? And my professor kept hammering on us like documentation. Show us documentation, write documentation for this class, write documentation for this function. And be like, right. And then we just write / anything so that we can just satisfy that requirement of the assignment and we can submit so we don't lose marks. Okay. And I'm hoping your professor is asking you to do the same thing with your projects, so that documentation is part of your marking scheme. Is it?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. And I would do it, okay, just to get the marks. Right? I don't want to lose the marks, right? And then I graduate, okay, never believing in this whole documentation thing, okay. And then I went on to do my PhD, right? And the PhD, they kept saying the same thing: documentation is very important. Documentation, right? And I read it in the books, right? I'm a teaching assistant, helping my professors teaching the courses, and I repeat the same thing, but I don't believe in it, okay. I was like, yeah, documentation, but even I myself, I'm not believing in it until I hit the workforce. Okay. Now, when I hit the workforce in that stock exchange company that I was working in New York, right? So I would work on a project. You got a project. Sometimes these projects are like maybe 3 weeks or a month and a half, right? I'd be working on it, and the whole thing is in my mind. I'm doing good, right? I understand it, so on. Not really bothering so much with documentation. And to make matter worse, that company was rather really edgy in the sense of they're cutthroat, where, yeah, don't bother with documentation, right? We want product development and so on. They didn't really believe in the whole, they were all computer scientists. They didn't really believe in the whole software engineering thing, right? And so I would go along and say, okay, they don't ask me for documentation, so I'm not going to do it, okay? So that makes me happy. and the project would be completed, and I submitted, and everything is fine, right? Talk about mini projects for about a month and a half, mini sub project, worked on them, say, a month and a half, submitted it. My boss is really, really happy. Everything is great. Okay. A couple of months later, some law and the government have changed about how stock exchanges should be. Okay. By the way, I should let you know that I was working there around 2008, where the stock market actually collapsed. It wasn't because of me. Okay. It's just, okay. It's not like I joined in and it just collapsed. All right. So the government, in order to combat this, because of a lot of bad practices and how the customers of stock exchange were actually trading their stocks. A lot of them are betting on the market collapsing rather than betting on the market actually picking up. Okay. Anyway, so the laws would come in and they say, you know, you shouldn't allow your customer to be able to do this. All right, fine. So we gotta just edit the software that I've checked in into the repository of the company and just make the edit. All right. Okay, great. So it's my project that I created with my own hands. I check it out. And I'm looking at my own code. Okay. I'm looking at my own code, which I've been creating for about a month and a half. And I have no idea, literally, not just figuratively, I have no idea what was I thinking. Okay. I know we keep saying, what was I thinking, as in, right, figuratively, but I'm actually talking literally. I have no idea, like, what is it? What? And I'm just hoping, searching to see just one slash anywhere. Okay. Just one comment anywhere, please just give me anything so I can. And then it took me quite a bit of time looking at my own code, trying to understand what I was thinking. And then after this whole struggle, I finally got it and I was able to make the change. Had I had it from the beginning, the whole thing would have taken maybe one day. Okay. Took a lot more. I can't remember how long, but it took a lot more and a lot more time just looking at the screen, going, scrolling down, like, what is it? Writing the functions down on paper and connecting the dots together to understand what is it that I have in my mind, what I had in my mind at some point. All right. So yes, documentation is important. I'm not expecting that you would be picking it up right after I told you the story, but at some point when you hit the industry, you will be hopefully an appreciation of it. All right. The good news is nowadays there's actually software tools that help, like JavaDoc. It helps us produce documentations on the fly, so it kind of like helps you along with it. All right. One thing that actually can help with documentation is the artifacts that we create in our design and our requirements. Okay, because remember, if we just go straight to coding, I don't have a design to look at. I don't have the requirements to look at. Okay, so you're looking at code. In theory, you have no idea what the code actually does, let alone how it does it. Okay. All right, so the hard question is, how does one manage to reduce the scope and keeping my customers happy? Well, I gotta set priorities. This is not what actually this yellow box is saying. I gotta set priorities. Okay. I'm gonna list down all the features that I have in my mind. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I'm gonna draw a requirements baseline. Okay. That requirements baseline is not some arbitrary line that I'm gonna create, but it's the list of the least acceptable product that I can create. So I have 10 features. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 together. If I was able to build them, then I can actually have a product. Okay. Might be missing the exciting features, but at least I have a product. Okay. Had I built not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I had built 5, 6, 7, 8, I would have had nothing. All right. So I got to draw a line saying, well, anything beyond this would be a luxury, fine. But this is the minimum that I need to develop in order to actually have an autonomous project, an autonomous piece of software that I can give you, say, here's something that you can actually use and do something with. Okay. For example, if we have a registration system, sorry, a university system, there's a lot of features. Okay, features that can deal with, parking, obviously registering your courses and so on, things that can deal with, say, the Moodle aspect, okay, professors communicating and so on. But I'm gonna put down the main features, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, being related to the ones that deal with you registering your courses, dropping your courses, and so on. Okay. If I didn't get around to the whole parking thing, if I didn't get around to this whole Moodle thing, okay, payroll thing, fine. At least I have something that is actually usable. Okay, I can package it, right? Put the sticky tape around it, and I can submit it. That it is something that is actually useful. Okay, and this will be in agreement with the customer saying, if we run out of time and money, this might be what we actually end up delivering. Okay. And it's also got to have a reasonable shot at actually succeeding. Okay. So you don't just look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and say, all right, this is my baseline. But even that, very unlikely that we're going to be able to complete it. Okay. Because if you don't, then you don't actually have something that makes even the minimum. Right. This is where you can consider at this point, this project is not feasible. Okay. Feasible means not actually doable. Right. We're just going to end up spending time and money, and nothing's going to be created. Remember at the beginning of this course, I was talking to you about how many projects were canceled and so on and so. A lot of it is because of the scope. Okay. Not just because we put too much into the scope to begin with, but we have something a little bit later on I'm going to talk about you about. It's called scope leakage. Okay. Where the scope actually keeps on moving. All right. Some people, somebody will call somebody up, it's like, yeah, add this feature in. So it gets squeezed into the project, and then that actually causes more problems and so on. All right. Just the fact that you're not able to set the scope properly. You don't actually know which one of these features should I be working on first, which one of these features I'll be working on next. What happens if one of those features are actually already implemented by something else that exists outside, right? I'm just doing redundant work. I'm reinventing the wheel, okay? So how do we define it? We got to set the priorities, okay? We're setting the priorities not just by the customer, but also the product managers, the development team, the users, all right? And then we establish a rough level of effort that is implied by each feature. Not just a rough level of effort, but also a risk level as well. So there's two things, okay? It is how important this thing for me, all right? How critical this feature is to the software, how much effort I'm going to be putting into it, and then how much risk as I'm doing it, okay? So if I ask you to create something that you've created something very, very similar before, you've seen it, done it, then you'll say, I can do it. I need my time, of course, but the risk factor is very, very minimal. If I'm asking you to do something to create software in an area that you've never actually experienced before, for example, augmented reality. I'm pretty sure none of you have actually done any programming, say, in augmented reality, okay? Or even web development. How many of you actually worked in web development so far? Probably none, okay? So if I ask you to do it, you might actually need to learn something and so on. But still, it's an unknown, right? So the risk factor is high, okay? The risk factor could be high for other reasons as well, okay? It could be because the one person that we have that we know is going to be working on this, they're not actually very happy with the salary that they're getting, and they're looking for offers from other companies and so on. So the risk factor becomes really, really high. And there's other reasons why the risk factors could get high. All right. So together we put those along. Let me just show you this table. So we have our lists. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Now we start to shuffle them around based on the three criteria that we have. Okay. The priority, the effort, and the risk. Okay. طبعا, if something is high priority, low effort, low risk, it's obviously a candidate to be at the very, very top. If something is low priority, high effort, high risk, it's obviously a candidate to be at the very, very bottom of that list, and it's not going to make the cut. Okay. The ones in the middle, these are the ones where it gets a little bit sketchy, right? It's not really, it's a gray area. It's not math. Okay, yes.
So when drawing the baseline, should we take into consideration the risk and the effort?
Yes, of course. Yeah, yeah, this is what I'm trying to say. Okay. So it's not just enough to say how important, not important is just that feature, but also, you know, the risk factor and also the effort factor. Because effort means more time and more money. Okay. And risk means it's it's kind of like the surge factor you get on Uber, right? So you take that thing and then you multiply by something else. Okay. Sometimes it could be in the positive, sometimes it could be in the negative. Okay. So obviously with Uber, the surge factor is always a positive. Okay. But it could have been this X and then you multiply by depending on the risk. If the risk is low, then maybe 1.1. This is as worse. If the risk is high, it could be multiplied by 5. I mean, it costs you 5 times as much to actually end up doing it. All right. So this is kind of like what you need to watch out for. All right. Sometimes in a unknown situation, very, very rare, you end up saying, oh, I set 1 month to do this task and realize I finished it in 2 weeks. Very rare, but it does happen every once in a while. Okay, so you think you're gonna be embarking on this beast and realize, well, that's a lot easier than I expected. All right. But anyways, as you're considering all three: priority, effort, risk. I'm gonna say this again. Okay. If you have a feature that is very, very critical, okay, we say critical, important, and useful. So useful means luxury. I mean, it would have been nice. Okay. That tends to be kind of like your main factor. And as you can see, they're sorted with priority mostly. All right. You might want to shuffle them around. It's all right. You can do that. Okay. But still, you got to take it into account. The other one, the effort. All right. How much effort? So even if it's important, but it's really, really high effort, all right, then maybe I'll leave that until post development. Okay. If it is very low effort, very low risk, but it's not really that important, again, I might want to leave that until, or I might keep it, again, it's a gray area. Okay. All right. So just to sum up, yes.
Doctor, how do we decide if we should take the risk or not?
So well, you're not just defining if you take the risk or not. You're deciding on first the risk level. You gotta determine that, and then you decide if he's gonna be in the baseline or outside the baseline. Okay. So how you're deciding, like I said, it's easy if that feature, critical, low effort, low risk, no brainer. It's easy if that feature is useful, I mean, not important, high risk, high effort, no brainer. The ones that are in the middle, it gets hard. It's not a science, it's an art. All right.
Depends on the situation.
Depending on the situation, depending on the nature of the feature and so on and so forth. You know, again, you're getting input from multiple people. It's not just the customer making this decision. You, the requirement engineer, you're doing this decision. The development team is sitting down with you so that they agree on creating that baseline. And you say, all right, this is in the middle. I'm going to draw my line over there. Okay. And that's really basically what it is. It's not really the most techie thing that you would expect. Nonetheless, it's a very, very important thing. A lot of the projects do fail because the scope is so high. So you set your plan from the beginning wrong. Okay. In other words, had I had that scope very, very high from the beginning, I might have actually on day one decided to work on feature 8, thinking I have enough time and enough money. When it wasn't really that critical, wasn't really that important. I would have maybe working on feature 5. Again, that's below the baseline. I come towards my deadline, I'm running out of money. I realize I don't have feature 4 and 6 at the very top over here. Okay. Now I say, oh, I wish I knew from the beginning that I'm gonna run out of time and money, and I would have actually paid more attention on working on feature 4 and 6 instead of working on features 5 and 8. You see how the planning from the beginning and establishing the scope and establishing the baseline actually affects the success of your project. All right. When you are downloading, say, a newer version of a software, okay, we always assumed that we all had this idea that the software team would actually, like say, a game. Okay, I don't know what. It's been a while since I've been playing it, but I don't know what games you play now. The PUBG or Fortnite. I don't know what games is playing. Minecraft. Minecraft. Okay, so great. So let's pick up Minecraft. Okay, I don't know if there's another version of Minecraft that ever actually came out like Minecraft 2. I don't know, but anyway, Minecraft one what comes up. We always keep thinking that the software the team worked on it, they finished it, they looked at it, said, yes, this is all that we hoped we can put into that game, and we publish it. Okay, and then after people start working on it, starts to get receiving a lot of success, they sit down again and say, okay, what we're going to do about version 2. Actually, in reality, they already had an idea of what they're going to be doing in version 2. It's just they didn't get the chance to do it in version 1. And at some point they decided, halas, this is it, this is enough, we got to push version 1. And what you see in the second version is leftovers, the useful features that you would found from version 1 that you haven't had the chance.
Like anything below the baseline.
Exactly, right? In addition to obviously new features and new things that come in, right? The new features might actually end up pushing those luxury or useful features back again below the baseline, and then it gets pushed on and on and on and on and on. It might one day expire, right? But yeah, this is how it works, all right? A lot of these games, they have that situation where a lot of the features that you see in this version were actually thought of in the previous versions, just didn't have the time to do it. Okay. One thing I mentioned a few moments ago is requirements leakage. Okay. Now, imagine if you have this list over here, all right? And then, because you don't have a proper working place, maybe let's even call it corrupt. Okay. Somebody, the customer phones in, 2 weeks into the project, all right? And they say, can you squeeze in feature number 11 in the top part, please? And then you start to say, yeah, okay, fine, I'll do it for you. This is called scope leakage. In reality, a proper development process would require that there is an official channel to submit those, what we call change requests. Okay, so adding is a change. Okay, and then that gets reviewed by a team, all right, and then decide the impact of that change, if we can actually do the change or not, right? And if it gets approved, then yeah, sure, we can go ahead with it. Okay, but a lot of times you get a shortcut into this requirements leakage, the scope leakage, and then this starts to move around. Okay, this took us a lot of effort just to put that baseline over here. And if I start to play around with that list in an informal way, then it might blow up in my face at the end. Okay, and again, this is very, very common. You'll see a software developer gets an email from the customer, can you add this feature and so on? And the programmer will be like, yeah, sure, I can do it. And they're doing it in the best of intentions. Okay, even the customer is doing it in the best of intentions. They never want their own project to fail. But yeah, not having this rigorous process, then it might be a recipe for disaster at a later point. Yes.
So basically, scope leakage is manipulating or changing the features that are already in the plan.
Yes, and even sometimes, usually it's because of adding rather than deleting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The eye just moves to a different place.
The eye wouldn't move because now you're moving the vision itself. Okay. Now, vision is one of those stable things. Okay. It's unlikely that a vision would change.
Yeah.
Right? The frequency of the change of the vision is very, very low. But then you move down to the feature, the frequency of change just to get a little bit higher.
Yeah.
Go down to the third layer, the frequency of change gets to be much, much higher. Okay. So for example, I want my system to be secure in my vision. Okay. That's unlikely to change any point. All right. It's unlikely that I'm going to come and say, that's okay. You don't mind. We doesn't have to be secure. Right. But at the same time, the specifics of the feature. So the feature, for example, I want username and password authentication. I'm going to use authentication as my way of doing. So the idea of using authentication as a feature, it might change, okay? But again, the likelihood is a little bit higher than changing of the vision itself, okay? Then we take the details of the authentication, username and password, okay? The specifications of the username and password and how exactly you're going to implement the username and password, okay? Whether it's a one-factor authentication or a two-factor authentication, that might actually change. Okay. Matter of fact, right now, the common thing in the security domain, as you're developing software, right? You no longer depend on something called the one-factor authentication. You always, every website that you're on keeps asking for something called a two-factor. Okay. Do you know what that mean? One factor, two factor? There's actually three factors. Okay. The first of which, it's not about that. It's what you know. Could include username and password. The second thing is what you have. Could be a badge, could be your phone, okay? And hence you enter username and password, then you get a message on your phone because it's what you know plus what you have. And the third level tends to be rather not so scalable and it requires a lot of technology, is what you are, okay? So what you are could be a fingerprint, a retina scan. That's even more, I mean, imagine you have the three-factor thing, you put in the username and password, then you get something that you got to use the badge for, so somebody has to steal that badge. And then even more than that, the retina scan, that actually kills all of it. That's really, really secure at this point. Anyway, talking about the authentication and so on, the details might actually change. And it probably has changed in all the companies and all the websites that we actually know at some point. All right. I'm not really sure why I went to this rabbit hole. Somebody was asking me something and I kept talking about, but anyway, yeah. So the vision, somebody was saying that the vision would change. Yeah, so the vision is unlikely to change. And even the features are unlikely to change that much, but what's likely to change is specifications. All right. So do we begin the next chapter? Yeah, we should begin the next chapter. Yes. Yes.
This one's like, no, I don't like it. I want features on top.
The features on top to be the baseline?
I mean,
okay, so maybe something at the bottom to be in here.
yes, exactly.
Yeah. So there's gonna be a lot of negotiations. I get it, right? This is not done, then we go show it to the customer, all right? And say, "Khlas, this is the force on this." The customer is involved. So the customer, the requirements team, the managers, the development team, together, they negotiate all of this, okay?
Even after all of these steps, the customer is still like, no, I want to do this feature.
Well, then the negotiation hasn't completed, okay? So, we can spend forever doing the negotiation, but once we finish it, khalas, we finish it, okay? Now, customers would be very, very helpful in telling you the criticality of the priorities and so on, right? Development team will tell you a lot more about the risks, all right? And the effort. This is where they come into play, all right? Requirements team, they can tell you also a lot about the priority of that feature, okay? Because they can envision, okay, I need, this, for example, you're using Microsoft Word. I'm pretty sure everybody used it at some point, right?
Changing the font is not as important as writing.
I was actually going to say that the font, okay, the font features.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, there's some sophisticated features in Microsoft Word that we don't even know about, but really less than 0.01% of the users of Microsoft Word ever actually use it. Okay. There's big fat books like this talking about how to use Microsoft Word or even Excel. Okay. But we're pretty sure that being able to edit the font is way up there in the list. All right. So that's actually very, very critical. For example, I'll give you a not so critical feature. There's a feature that actually counts how many characters and white spaces and so on. I mean, if that wasn't there, not a big deal. All right. How many times did you actually write something and you read how many characters they actually have? We don't really bother with that very much, but pretty much the font changing is something we actually do every single letter that we write or every single document that we create. Okay. So then the feature of the font changing shoots up way over here. The feature of character counting goes to the bottom. Okay, a lot of the times because how many people are expecting to deal with it. All right. If you think about a different domain, let's think about a different domain here. Okay, let's just talk about an ATM machine. All right. What are the most critical features? What are the most commonly used features that you'll see at an ATM machine? Could be something like
Cash.
getting cash,
Reading the chip. Reading the chip.
the chip.
Reading it.
Yeah, reading the chip, obviously for authentication. Yeah. What else?
Which language?
Which language? Okay, good. What could be? Can you imagine something that would be below the baseline on an ATM machine?
The scanner, where you don't have to place the card inside.
It could be, yeah, because that's another way of authentication. Okay, could be something like paying bills, right? How many of us actually stand in front of an ATM machine to pay a bill? We just do it on our phones nowadays. Okay, let's take a different example. Let's just have a registration system like Net Classroom. What are the most critical features? Easy, register a course, drop a course. Okay, but think of a feature that you think maybe wouldn't make it in the baseline.
How to display your schedule?
Displaying the schedule.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, obviously you need to register in the course first before you can display the schedule. So if I don't have that feature, then that second feature is completely useless. See what I mean? Actually, that's a very, very good example of saying somebody who invested time on creating the schedule and they didn't actually plan on creating the features of adding the course and dropping the course. And then they realize they have the schedule maker, but they don't have the course adder. And then the product becomes, it doesn't make the minimum. Remember the word I was saying, making the minimum? Okay, so if you give me a product, I would be able to add and drop courses without the schedule, I can use it. But one that gives me the schedule, without being able to add and drop courses, is completely useless to me. All right?
What's the what if scenario?
Of what?
That possible. There's a what if scenario. It's basically useless.
What is the what if? There's a what if scenario in that classroom? I don't know what the feature is about. There's a feature called what if.
Yeah, so that's probably behind the baseline.
Yeah, probably, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure the first version of Net Classroom never had things like what if and schedule maker and so on. Maybe the schedule, because it's actually pretty cool, but yeah, maybe the what if thing would be considered a luxury feature. Yes.
So, how much can I add up? You do an A and actually always take over at the beginning of the project, so like all the project that you read and everything. There's the ending, there's like, I need this. So is it possible to like make it a plan A and a plan B?
Well, this is plan B.
And then like telling the stakeholders, okay, plan A, if we were able to be ahead of the deadline, this is gonna happen.
Yeah.
But if we were late, this is gonna happen. Like,
So-
have to.
In a sense, this is what this is doing. Okay, so if you get to here and you ahead of time and you had a schedule, you got more time. Yeah, we'll move on to. I mean, remember, this over here, this line, there's a likelihood of 99% that you will be able to make it. Okay, that's one of the reasons why you put that line over here, is that you feel, because if you feel like this is the minimum, and the chance of me completing this with success is 5%, then what's the point of even beginning this project to begin? It's doomed to fail. Okay, so I know this is, this is gonna reach, this is 1 year down the line, okay? But I know by the time I finish feature 3, I'm gonna need 6 months only. Okay, so I'm already putting a nice buffer there. Okay, now I finish feature 3, I move on to feature 2, then feature 5, then feature 7, all right, and so on, one feature at a time. Okay, okay, all good? All right, so I want to now open up the beginning of next chapter. Exams, nope, not yet. It's a little teaser there. Okay, make sure I do the screen share. Because otherwise the guys at home are like, I can't see the screen. Okay, so we're gonna begin this chapter because it's slightly related to what we had before, and but we're probably gonna end up finishing it maybe at the next lecture. Okay, basically the The purpose behind this chapter is to review the requirements engineering process. We looked at the whole process of software development lifecycle with requirements being one slot. Okay, now we're going to break down that one big box into actually 4 other boxes. Okay, and doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what sort of project you're working on. There is going to be requirements involved. Okay, and there is a process there. Whether we explicitly acknowledge it or not, that's a different thing. Okay, so even if somebody says, I never actually bother with the requirements, they actually have requirements. They have the requirements in their mind. Okay, nobody actually creates a piece of software and say, I wonder what that's going to be useful for. Okay, it's never like that. There's always like, I want software that does it. Then they start working on it. Okay, they might not document it, but they still have to have a reason to do it for it. Okay, and there is a number of steps. Okay, and those steps, I'm going to put this over here. I'm going to put a line. Okay, I'm going to draw a line over here. Okay, on the left-hand side of that line is where we get to see something called a feasibility study. Sometimes the vision document will be created during that feasibility study. And then the next would be 4 different processes. Now you will see the word "and" over here. And I actually like to say, remove this over here. I like to say that there's something called analysis. I'm going to make that at a different box, right? Followed by specification. Okay. Again, this slide is from a book. It's not really my slide, but I'd rather actually create it this way. Okay. Or actually even better. Okay. Well, yeah. Analysis over here, analysis and specification. Okay. So everything you'll see from now on that has a round edge, an icon with a round edge at the end, that's a process, a verb, a thing to do. Okay. Anything that you see with a right angled edge at the end, this is a product, a noun, a thing. Okay. So we do a feasibility study, we end up with a feasibility study report. Okay. We do requirements solicitation, we end up with, say, system models and user and system requirements documentation. Okay. Now, in a nutshell, what you see over on this side, let me just write this down over here. On this side, this is before a project actually gets the go-ahead light. What you see over on this side is after a project gets the go-ahead light. Now, the feasibility study, the direct Arabic translation for it, do you know what it is?
Can you do the project one?
No, the Arabic translation for it. Huh? Arabic. Does anybody know the Arabic translation for the word feasibility study? Exactly. Good man. دراسة جدول. Okay. You'll see that in if you want to create a coffee shop or anything like that, it's got to be دراسة جدول, and then at the end of دراسة الجدول, the feasibility study, you decide whether you're going to go ahead with the project or not. Because maybe you do the numbers, you check the market and so on, and then you realize, this is not worth it for me. All right. So a feasibility study got to be quick and dirty, maybe a couple of weeks, no more than that. There's some companies that actually specialize in conducting feasibility studies. So consultants, you can get them in and they do the feasibility study on your behalf. All right. And again, the reason why it's got to be quick, it's because, if you spend 8 months doing it, like I said before, you realize, yeah, this is not a good project to do, but I already spent 8 months of work coming to this realization. Okay. And the things that you check for in a feasibility study is, do I have enough resources for it? And with all of its flavors. Okay. And sometimes the time is not just how quickly does the customer want it, but sometimes it's because there's a different competing product out there that I want to beat it. Okay. So if I can't make it before them, then what's the point of creating the product? Okay. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, can it be done? Okay. Do we even have the technology for it? Okay. So sometimes we sit down, I want to, software that doesn't, maybe we don't actually have the technology, doesn't actually exist just yet. Okay. Number 3. Okay. Obviously the money that we're going to make, not the money we're going to spend, but how much money are we going to be making? And sometimes the money that you're making is not necessarily in a profit, but rather about how much money you're saving. Okay, so this product saves me 1,000 riyals. It's kind of like exactly like you've made 1,000 riyals. Okay, or how much money is it going to make me down the line? So feasibility study, you do all of these, right? And executive management, they deal with this rather than software engineers per se. And they're the ones who decide on saying, okay, we'll go ahead with that project, we'll go ahead with this project, or we're not going to do that project, and so on. Okay. There's something also called the PMO that you'll see in the companies. Okay, the PMO is kind of like the manager over the project managers, and they get to judge over a portfolio of projects for the company. So any company wouldn't have just one project going on; they have a portfolio of projects, and then they would decide based on, say, the theme of the project that they're working on, the venture, the area that the company is venturing. Maybe this project is not really good for us right now, or maybe this one is really, really good and it will help our team. So it's a business decision. It's a feasibility. Usually at the end of the set saying, green light, go ahead, or don't go ahead. All right. And we have 4 steps. Okay. First of which, if we go, we get elicitation. Imagine it this way, elicitation. Give me as much information as I can get. Okay, could be from human beings, could be from user manuals, could be from anything. Okay, just give me as much information as I can get. All right. One of the sources of information could be an existing system. Okay, so you hired me to create a new registration system instead of Net Classroom because you don't like Net Classroom. So one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to actually look at Net Classroom and see what are the people doing over there. Okay, one of the things that I can do is I can shadow people. Okay, so I sit down with a student and I watch them registering courses and I see how are they actually doing this. What are they suffering with? What are the things that they like? What are the things that they wish they like? Okay, just by shadowing them. Okay, you get a lot more information than if you just ask them. Okay, and once you start asking people to tell you the whole truth, maybe not the whole truth, you never know. Okay, fake news and so on. Right, so you get all this information. The next step would be to analyze it. The word analyze means to make sense of something. Okay, actually the word analyze, the Arabic version of it is the direct translation, tahleel. Okay, what does tahleel actually mean, Arabic or English? Okay, it means understanding what something is made of. Okay, let me do blood analysis, tahleel dam. They're actually figuring out what are the components that make up your blood. Okay, you got like 5% this, 10% this, 5% that, you know, the cholesterol is high, that this is low, and the iron is this, right? They're making, right? And with it, as they break it down, then they get an understanding of your health situation, your health condition. Okay, right? In football, you'll see the word studio tahlili. Okay, studio tahlili usually comes after the game to explain to you what the heck happened in the game. Okay, so you saw the game, it finished 3-0. All right, and now they're explaining to you why it ended up like geniuses, like why. Yeah, it's very clear, like it's very obvious why it ended up being 3-0. Okay, although the same people before the match they said it's going to end up being 0-0, and now it's 3-0. And now they have all the answers for you. But anyway, you're making sense of it, and when you make sense of it, you realize you check for the 3 C's. Okay, remember what the 3 C's are? Did I mention them before? Okay. Can you guess what the 3 C's are? Quality attributes. The first C.
Content.
No, that's close. Close. No.
Component.
No. No. Quality. Cost is not a quality. Right? Things that I want to have as a quality attribute. Okay, I'll give you the first one. Correctness. That is correct. Okay. And then the second one.
Credibility.
Huh?
Credibility.
Credibility? No, no, close. Okay, but that falls on the correctness. The other one, okay, C-O-M.
Communication.
No.
Commitment. Commitment.
No. C-O-M-P.
Computation.
No. C-O-M-P-L.
Complexity.
Confusion.
Complexity.
Now I lost the word. Yeah. Correct, complete. Yes, that they actually you don't have anything missing. And the last one is CON.
Context.
No,
It's not the content.
no. Content, خلاص, we're looking at the content to see if it's correct and complete, and that it is CONS.
Concise.
Close. CONSI.
Concise.
Still concise.
Consistent.
Consistent, yes. All right. All right. So in a nutshell, correct means you told me that the stadium had 20,000 seats. It actually has 15,000. Okay. Complete. Okay. You gave me features 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You forgot to give me 6 and 7. Requirement 6 and 7. Okay. And consistent meaning, all right. I talked with somebody. He said, I want big buttons. I thought somebody else says, I want small buttons. They're inconsistent. Okay. We're going to talk about how we deal with all of this later on, right? Obviously, when you doing the analysis, we finally realize, okay, this is what we actually want the system to do. Because this is a software engineering process, we're not dealing with 1 or 2 people, we're dealing with many, many people. We got to write it down at some point. So this is what we call specification. Specification really is the documentation of the requirement. Okay, you specify it down. And then now we have a shared document so that even if you leave the company, right, it's there. If you talk with somebody later on, you can't change your mind because it's already documented. All right. And even for yourself to remember what the heck you were talking about at some point earlier on. And then the 4th step is requirements validation. Validation is, in a sense, making sure that we're going to be building the right system. Okay. It's different than building the system right. This is SE 412. We're going to talk about this a little later on. But are we building the right system? Okay. After all of this is another safety net, another check that before I commit and go ahead and do this project, am I going to be building the right? Is this really what we have in mind? Is this really what we need for the system, for this company, for this corporation? This is called validation. And again, we do the same checks that we did with the feasibility study. So now that we've written down the requirements, do we have the technology for it? Do we still have the budget for it? Do we still have the schedule for it? Okay. Hopefully it would have been caught at the feasibility study, but even then, it's better late than never. Okay. You don't want to get to implementation and realize, I don't have the money for this. Okay. So it's another type of validation as well. All right. So I'm going to stop here and we'll finish this chapter at the beginning of next lecture on what day is today? Wednesday? Yeah, Monday. And then we'll begin hopefully at the end of next lecture, we'll begin with system context modeling. Now, the slides for system context modeling is actually very, very small. It's not that big. Okay. Most of the learning is in the exercise. Okay. So, if as much as you can, make sure you don't actually miss those exercises. These are the most important thing. If you don't, you'll be quite lost in doing, because now what we're going to do is we're going to do an exercise, 1 and 2 and 3 exercises. Then you're going to get a quiz with the same exact type of question that you'll see in those exercises. And then what you see in the exam, it's going to be the same as the quiz, it's going to be the same as the exercise. Okay. So if you don't attend the exercise at the beginning, you can see how you're putting the seed for failure and those other activities. Okay. All right. That's it. I'll see you guys on Monday.
Thank you.
Okay.
Doctor, I was wondering if we had a subject that taught us how to work in groups. Because when we did the project for, I think it was
SE 120.
no, the one with the JavaFX, I forgot the code for it. We faced some problems, so I thought
There's going to be a lot.